He wasn't supposed to be there. The war was over. But he heard something capped. Small, afraid.
The war had ended 3 months ago, but no one had told the ruins that. Sergeant Caleb Mercer stood at the edge of the abandoned colony settlement on Veyrath 7, watching the twin moons rise through a broken dome. The silence here was thick, the kind that settles after screaming stops. He wasn't supposed to be here. The United Earth Garrison had ordered all soldiers off this moon as part of the ceasefire agreement with the Veyrath Collective. But Caleb had heard the sound, faint, barely above the wind, coming from beneath the collapsed medical ward. A whimper, small, afraid. He had dug for 2 hours with his bare hands. What he found was a child. Not human Veyrath. She couldn't have been more than 4 cycles old in their reckoning. Her skin shimmered faintly like deep ocean water, her large silver eyes glazed with fever, her small body half buried under a collapsed support beam. She wore no armor, no tribal markings of the Collective's warrior caste. She was just a child. Frightened.
Dying.
Caleb did not hesitate. He lifted her out, wrapped her in his thermal blanket, and administered the only thing he had, a basic human med pack. It wasn't designed for Veyrath biology. It was a risk. But leaving her, there was something he simply couldn't do. For 6 days, he stayed hidden in the ruins, keeping her alive. He fed her ration packs dissolved in water, kept the wound on her side cleaned, and spoke softly to her even though neither understood the other's language. She began to respond on the 3rd day, reaching for his hand with tiny translucent fingers. By the 5th day, she was sitting up, watching him with those enormous silver eyes, curious and no longer afraid. He called her Echo because she started mimicking his words, repeating sounds back to him with perfect clarity, her small mouth shaping human syllables like they were music. On the 7th day, they came. Caleb heard them before he saw them, the low harmonic hum that Veyrath warriors emit when they move in formation, a sound that resonated in the chest before it reached the ears. He stepped out of the ruin with his hands raised, Echo held carefully against his chest. 20 soldiers materialized from the mist. Full ceremonial armor, obsidian black with deep blue bioluminescent lines running through it like rivers. Their weapons were raised. Their eyes locked on him with cold, alien calculation. And then she emerged. The queen of the Veyrath Collective did not move like the others. She moved like weather, inevitable, consuming, impossible to ignore. She was tall, almost 7 feet, her long hair the color of a deep ocean trench, her armor unlike anything her soldiers wore, ancient, ceremonial, carved from materials that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her eyes, when they found Echo, blazed with something raw and terrifying. Relief. She had been searching. For 7 days, the most powerful queen in the Collective had been tearing apart this moon looking for her daughter. Echo heard her mother's harmonic voice and reached out instantly, calling back in the Veyrath tongue. But then she turned and gripped Caleb's uniform with both hands, babbling urgently in the strange mix of sounds she developed. Part Veyrath, part the human words she'd learned from him.
Stay.
Stay.
Callie,
stay. The soldiers raised their weapons. 1 step forward from Caleb, and they would fire. He didn't move. He looked directly at the queen and slowly, carefully, transferred Echo into her mother's arms. He stepped back, hands still raised. He said nothing. He didn't need to. What he had done was written in the child's health, in the healed wound on her side, in the way she clung to his jacket even as she held her mother. The queen looked down at Echo, then up at Caleb. Her expression was unreadable, the way deep water is unreadable, ancient, unknowable. But her soldiers had not fired.
She spoke.
The translation unit on Caleb's wrist flickered to life, an old model, barely functional. It caught fragments. Human soldier, kept alive, my blood. Reason not given to collective law. Under our law, life given deserves life returned. Caleb exhaled slowly. He had saved the enemy's child. He had expected execution. He had prepared himself for it. What he had not prepared for was what the Queen said next. She took one step forward. Her soldiers lowered their weapons immediately, a silent command that moved through them like a current. She stood before Caleb now, close enough that he could see the patterns moving under her skin, bioluminescent, like the aurora. Her eyes met his with something that was not warmth, exactly, but was something close to recognition. One apex predator to another. One protector to another. You are claimed, she said in clean, perfect, unbroken English. By the blood of my line. By Veyrath law, you now stand under my protection. No human court. No garrison. No treaty can touch you. Caleb stared at her. What does that mean? He asked quietly. Echo, still in her mother's arms, reached out and patted Caleb's cheek with a small glowing hand. The Queen's expression shifted, barely, like light changing on water, into something that might have been the beginning of a smile. It means, the Queen said, you are no longer their soldier. You are mine. Caleb Mercer had survived a war. He had survived 6 days in enemy ruins with a dying alien child. He had survived facing down 20 Veyrath warriors with his hands in the air. He had not expected to end that day standing in the mist of Veyrath, 7, claimed by a queen who moved like weather, with a small glowing child waving at him from her mother's arms. He had not expected any of this. But as the twin moons climbed higher over the broken dome and Echo laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes, Caleb Mercer lowered his hands, looked at the Queen who had already turned to lead her soldiers home, and followed. Because some choices are not made with the mind. They are made with something older. Something that does not speak in commands or laws or treaties. Something that simply knows, this is where you belong now.